Hello and welcome to Chaotic Insights, where I break down the TV show Chaotic, and today we will be talking about Season 3, Episode 3, Kickin Bot. So grab a snack, start your laundry, and we'll dive right in with the episode summary. Sarah and Peyton are watching a match and cheering on a Danian and brainwashed Mepedian, respectively, when Kaz approaches and wants to show them his new Iron Pillar card. They push him off because Iron Pillar is so common, but they are shocked when they see it. So Kaz goes on to tell the story that Hearing told him, which starts with Kaor admiring a statue that they built of him. Of Kaor, they built a Kaor statue. When Almar interrupts and tells Kaor that Gigantropers are attacking Underworld City, they fail to defeat the Gigantropers, so they make a new plan to divert them to Iron Pillar because battle gear doesn't work at Iron Pillar. And so Almar then reveals that they may not be battle gear anymore because he put a piece of his brain in each of the robots. So at Iron Pillar, they're fighting the robots, and Kaor returns with a statue of himself that he is like puppeteering to fight the robots, but then the robots combined to create one giant robot. And the Iron Pillar starts to collapse, and the robots listen to reason. They say, like, if Iron Pillar collapses and the ceiling above the underworld collapses, we're all going to die, including you. And so it's a real Guardians of the Galaxy moment of like, well, am I going to save the galaxy because I live in it? Well, the robot saves Iron Pillar because he lives in it. And then Kaor rusts the robot in place, and Iron Pillar is changed forever. So, on to analysis. The structure of this episode is a bit like a turducken. It's a bird stuffed inside of a bird, stuffed inside of a bird. And what I mean by that is we get three stories that zoom in, and then zoom out, zoom out. And we get two sets of frames for one picture. You know what I mean? Like the broadest story, our tertiary story, is Kaz at Chaotic telling this story. And Kaz interrupts the usual ongoings at Chaotic and becomes the narrator of Hearing's story. And this is a real retelling of what Hearing told Kaz, but like we'll go with it. Wouldn't it be more reliable if Hearing was our narrator? Yeah, but whatever. And so we, take this inciting incident of interrupting the normal ongoings at Chaotic, and we use Kaz to zoom in from Chaotic to Underworld City, and then we get our second story. And this is the main story of the episode, really. It answers the question that Kaz introduces, which is, what happened to Iron Pillar? And from there, Kaz/Hearing's story, we zoom into Almar's story, which is about how he put pieces of his own brain into the Gigantropers. And that's like the real inciting incident of the plot. So like narratively, we're playing with the structure of this episode. And even though Almar's experience is like the seed of the story, it's the through line of emotion, it is secondary to answering the question, what happened to Iron Pillar? That's the question that Kaz is answering, but the story is about what Almar did. And so there's like a discrepancy there. And I think that's how I feel about this episode, is that they're concealing the more interesting story with these two framing devices. Like to me, the real interesting part of the story here is Almar like creating sentience by putting his own brain into battle gear. That's like the C story in this episode and not the main focus. Even though it is the plot is that Almar did that, it's not how it's presented. So it makes sense that like Kaz is the entry point for his friends to learn about this information, and it makes sense for Kaz to get that information from Hearing, and for Hearing to have been a witness to Kaor's story. But Hearing is fulfilling the role that the humans normally fulfill in this story, like leaving no room for the humans in the actual plot. Besides the glimpse of the match, this is a full Param story, and yet it's still framed by a human narrator, which is actually the second time this season that we've gotten a full Param story with a human narrator, because Clay narrates the Avena Nevena tale, and now Kaz is narrating Hearing's story about Kaor and Almar and what happened to Iron Pillar. So I would say they're experimenting with like structure in this season so far, but this episode is a more extreme version of that device of using a human to tell like the creature stories, and I think that's interesting. Now on to themes. I think the theme is perhaps like caution is an important part of innovation. Like you got to be careful what you do. And another thing I think is noteworthy in this episode is the overarching narrative plot takes place in like the reconstruction of the Marillion invasion, and the plot necessitates that Kaor's victory statue combats the robots, like is the combatant. And so I fear the Marillions became a catalyst for like increasing the arms power of the underworld, which drives Almar to create more Gigantropers, but also innovate with them. And so this story is a direct continuation of the Marillion invasion story. Like, it's not part of that overarching story, but it deals with the ramifications of it. It deals with the ramifications of the war in a similar yet different way from the first episode, which was Perithion, where they were like celebrating the victory. And that plot is the aftermath of the Marillion invasion, and this episode is also aftermath of the Marillion invasion. Right? They're moving the story forward because like the Marillion invasion had consequences and has ramifications, and this is just one of them. That the overworld built up their arms, and now those arms have gained consciousness and are rebelling against them. And also that like Kaor is building art. So the victory statue that Kaor is building, I think, paints Kaor in an interesting light. It demonstrates his leadership techniques, like he's a punitive leader, like because he punishes Almar, but it's also like self-congratulatory or like self-obsessive in a way. He commissions the statue of himself, and the outer wall of Underworld City also looks like him, and there's a stained glass window of him. Right, he's a patron of the arts, but like really just when it's about himself. And so I would say those are aspects of the character that they strengthen this episode is like his kind of self identity, but they don't really focus on his other characteristics, like his intuition or his strength and power. And because Kaor is self involved, they're building a statue which they can use. Right? It all ties back to this plot. Like it's relatively well constructed. I just think, I think the most interesting thing is Almar's story and not Kaor's. So let's move on to lore. Things we learn, the Underworlders have first responders called the Scorcher Squad, complete with their own vehicles, and their purpose is to respond to emergencies, I presume. Similar to a firefighter, but they use fire to fight. We also learn about the location Sabertooth Cavern, which is a tunnel that leads to Iron Pillar. And then we learn, like the main plot of this episode is Almar put a piece of his brain into the Gigantroper battle gear, and it converted them from battle gear into creatures. And this is big news to me, and I think this is the most exciting piece of lore in the episode, because do I think this foreshadows a new tribe? Maybe, like something mechanical, something like battle gear that have become creatures. I think that's possible that this is a tribe that could develop in the future. But also, I think it's interesting to compare it to the warriors of Awaiki because the opposite thing happened to them. The warriors of Awaiki were robbed of their creaturehood and turned into battle gear, and these battle gear gained creaturehood by gaining consciousness from Almar's brain. And so, like, do you think these mechanic robots are a new tribe of creatures, or do you think they fall under the underworld umbrella? And what do you think defines creaturehood in chaotic? I think part of it is consciousness. Like, these robots have gained consciousness and the ability to think for themselves, but the warriors of Awaiki also have that. So, what's the difference? Now, some more things we get. I think it's interesting that Kaor's giant statue still worked in Iron Pillar, right? Because I would categorize that as battle gear, even though it's operated manually. Like, in comparison, let's talk about battle gear. So, a sword is battle gear, but a sword you swing it, right? It's just a sharp stick. Versus, like, technology. Like, the Gigantroper before it gained consciousness, that was battle gear. So, that's technology, and a sword is just a stick that's sharp. So would a sword not work at Iron Pillar because it's considered battle gear? Or do we have to narrow our understanding of Iron Pillar's effects to technology and not the broader category of battle gear? Right? Because Kaor puppeting this, you know, giant statue, I'm assuming he's using a pulley system of some kind, like he's pulling ropes to like puppeteer the statue. And so that might not be complex technology, but it's still like a pulley is a machine, right? It's one of our simple machines. There's the lever, the wheel, the axle, a pulley, the inclined plane, and like a screw. Those are like the five, six simple machines. So like would a lever stop working at Iron Pillar? Is that what we're categorizing as battle gear? Or is it just technology? Does it have to be advanced in some way so that it can malfunction? Right? My sword's not going to stop working at Iron Pillar, but my robot is. Is my, axle going to stop working? No. So Kaor's battle gear still works. So what's that definition of Iron Pillar? I think that's interesting. Now, we also learned that Almar has gained an assistant named Ygrat, and that's interesting, and I think that parallels like the dynamic between Bodil and Olkiax in the overworld. Like they both have gained an assistant recently, and they're keeping it balanced, but it also makes sense with increased production, with increased innovation, you would need increased personnel. So now on to fun facts and other notes. My favorite joke of this episode is maybe it was in the back of my mind, but the piece of brain I used was in the front. That's funny. Other notes I have Frankenstein, Megazord, Kaibon, and robot motivation. So ponder that. But my final thoughts on this episode are this episode, right? It's not my favorite. I think it's fine. I think it's interesting. I think it's compelling. But it's not like encapsulating in the way that some of my favorite episodes are. And I think it's due to both the way they're experimenting with structure and subject matter. Like, I think the Almar part of the story is the most interesting, but it's the smallest part. And so, giant robots are cool. KR using the statue is cool. I think it's fun to see the dynamics in the underworld. Like, it's all fine. You know what I mean? It's fine. So let me know what you think if there's anything I missed. And with that, thanks for watching. Bye.